At 16, my mom sent me to a behavioral rehab because my brother faked a bruise and called me violent. 2 years later, his lies fell apart. He was caught stealing. My dad finally confessed he knew the truth, and my mom's breakdown made headlines. Hey, Reddit. My family spent years calling me the problem. They lied, twisted everything, and finally sent me away to fix me. I kept quiet, built my own life, and thought I was free until their whole act started falling apart. But first, here's how it really started. I'm Virginia, 16. I live in a house that looks perfect if you drive by too quick. My mom, Clara, calls it her safe space. The lawn's always cut straight, curtains always match. Even the mailbox gets wiped down. Inside, though, everything feels like it could explode over the smallest thing. Dad Tom travels most weeks. When he's home, he camps out in his office pretending to work. He's good at nodding without listening. Mom says he's the steady one, but that's only because he never takes a side. Then there's my brother, Ryan, 13, baby face, fake innocence, full-time tattletale. He figured out early that acting scared of me gets him out of trouble. I could breathe too loud, and he'd say I was mad again. And Mom would scold me before even asking what happened. Every morning, Mom starts with her checklist voice. Shoes by the door, dishes away, no crumbs on the counter. She's not mean at first, just exact. But the tone changes fast if you don't follow the script. She keeps a whiteboard in the kitchen with house standards. That's what she calls rules. Each one has a check mark next to it if you did good that day. She says it teaches accountability. I say nothing because talking back just adds a red X beside my name. We go to church every Sunday. Ryan plays the angel. People love him there. Mom beams when someone says, "You've raised such polite kids." She doesn't look at me when they say it. School's no break. Teachers label me as having an attitude problem. Apparently, asking why a rule exists means you're disrespectful. So I keep quiet. I get decent grades, not great ones, because I'm tired of hearing Mom say you could do better if you focused like your brother. Mrs. Heller, our next-door neighbor, doesn't help. She's the kind who waters her plants just to spy. She tells Mom she's concerned about me, says I look angry when I walk home from school. Mom eats that up. After one of those talks, I came home to find my door open and my stuff rearranged. She said she was checking for cigarettes. I don't even smoke. That night, I started locking my phone in a shoebox under my bed. She'd already gone through it once, saying she was making sure you're not getting into the wrong influences. The house runs on surveillance. Cameras in the living room for insurance, door codes that Mom changes monthly. She calls it responsible parenting. I call it paranoia. I keep my sanity by fixing my old bike. There's something about tightening bolts and hearing the click of gears that makes sense. Machines don't lie about what's wrong with them. Ryan likes to watch me from the porch. He'll smile like we're good siblings, then say something like, "Mom said you're not supposed to use the tools without asking." Then he'll run inside before I can answer. 10 minutes later, Mom's at the door saying, "What did I tell you about respecting house property?" When Dad left for another trip later that week, Ryan started bragging about his new privileges. Mom gave him access to the home tablet and told him he could help track chores. Basically, he got promoted to spy. I tried to talk to Mom about it once. I said, "I feel like you believe him no matter what he says." She said, "Then maybe stop giving him reasons to worry." That was the whole conversation. By Friday, the air in the house felt heavy. Even the lights seemed too bright. Ryan was testing me, breaking little things. A picture frame, a phone charger, then whispering, "Mom's going to blame you." He wasn't wrong. That night, after everyone went to bed, I walked into the hallway for water. I heard my parents' door cracked open. Mom's voice was sharp, low. "She's going to ruin everything we've built." Dad's reply came muffled. "She's just a kid." "No," she said. "She's a problem." I stood there still until the floor creaked. The voices stopped. I went back to my room and lay there staring at the ceiling fan. It buzzed faintly, off balance. I thought about how even something perfectly installed can shake itself loose if it spins too long. That's what the house felt like. Everything spinning, pretending it was under control. The week started off tense. Nobody said it out loud, but the house felt like it was waiting for someone to mess up. Mom was pacing more than usual, her lips tight, her eyes darting around like she was looking for something out of place. Dad stayed late at work every night, claiming extra meetings. Ryan was grinning too much. that fake calm before he pulled something. Wednesday afternoon, Mom was in her office finishing a presentation for her job. Ryan was hovering behind her, pretending to help. 10 minutes later, I heard her scream, the kind of scream that makes your stomach drop. I ran in and saw her clutching her laptop, eyes wild. "It's gone! The file's gone!" she shouted. Ryan stepped back, hands up. "Virginia used the computer earlier," he said quickly. That wasn't true. I hadn't touched it, but she spun toward me before I could speak. "You did this, didn't you? You can't stand to see anyone else succeed," I said. "I didn't even open your laptop." She pointed at me like she was addressing a criminal. "You think this is funny? I have a deadline." Dad walked in halfway through and just sighed. "Can we not?" he said. Mom ignored him and yelled, "You're sabotaging me." I stood there, hands open. "Check the history," I said. "You'll see. I wasn't even logged in." She didn't check anything. She just slammed the laptop shut and stormed off. Later, I heard her tell Dad autosave brought it back. The trash showed it was renamed and deleted while Ryan was helping. Dinner that night was a minefield. Ryan kept poking at me under the table, whispering, "Maybe don't touch Mom's stuff next time." I told him to stop. Mom looked up from her plate. "Don't start." I wasn't starting. I barely said anything. She nitpicked everything I did. How I chewed, how I breathed, how I looked checked out. Dad stared at his food like he wanted to disappear. When Mom's phone buzzed, she read something, frowned, and muttered, "Unbelievable." She put the phone down hard. "Your teacher emailed me," she said. "Apparently, you're being disrespectful again. Non-cooperative. Is this true?" I said, "I didn't say anything disrespectful. I just asked." She cut me off. "You just can't stop talking back, can you?" Dad rubbed his forehead. "Virginia, you gotta stop making everything harder than it is. Just do what you're told." I said, "I'm not doing anything wrong." He snapped. "Then get serious or get out." I felt the air leave my chest. Ryan leaned back in his chair like he was watching a show. Mom said, "That's enough. Go to your room. I'm done." I stood up but stayed there trying to find the right words. I said, "You don't even listen anymore." She said, "Because I'm tired of the lies." Ryan had his phone half hidden, recording. I saw the reflection in the glass cabinet. He wanted proof of me losing it. I took one step closer to the counter and slammed my hand on it. The sound echoed. "Nobody listens," I said. My voice cracked halfway through. I wasn't yelling threats. I was just tired. Ryan jumped up, bolted for the stairs, and yelled, "She hit me!" Mom gasped and ran after him. I followed a few seconds later. She was in his room, holding him while he pretended to cry. His gaming monitor was on the floor, cracked through the middle. He had one hand on his shoulder, red like he'd rubbed it hard. "She grabbed me and threw it," Ryan said between fake sobs. Mom looked back at me like I'd pulled a knife. "You did this?" she asked. I said, "No, I didn't touch him." She didn't blink. "You stay right there," she said, voice low and sharp. "Don't move." Dad came running up, looked at the monitor, then at me. "What the hell happened?" I said. "Ask him. He broke it earlier." Ryan said, "She's lying. She freaked out." Mom didn't ask for more details. She pulled out her phone and said she was calling the police for safety. I said, "Are you serious?" When the officers showed up, everything slowed down. They asked questions, looked around, saw no real injuries. Ryan kept sniffling in his mother's arms. I stood by the wall, numb. One of the cops asked if I wanted to go somewhere else for the night. I said no. He nodded, told Mom there wasn't much they could do. When they left, the silence was worse than the shouting. Mom said, "You need help. This can't go on." I said, "I didn't hurt him." She said, "That's exactly what someone in denial says." Dad started packing a small bag with my clothes. I asked where I was going. He said, "Just do what your mother says. It's for the best." I didn't argue anymore. The next morning, Mom was already dressed, car keys in hand. She said, "We're taking you to a program, a good one. They help families like ours." She made it sound like a vacation. Dad carried the bag. Ryan sat at the bottom of the stairs with cereal and that same small smirk he always got when things went his way. I walked out without looking at him. In the car, Mom talked about healing and starting over. Her voice was calm, almost cheerful, like she'd solved a big problem. I looked out the window. The houses slid past, perfect lawns, clean driveways, families who probably thought we were normal. I didn't say a word the whole ride. I kept thinking, this isn't help, it's cleanup. They weren't saving me. They were getting rid of me. The place they took me to was called Ridgeway Youth Recovery Center. The sign out front had a tree logo and the slogan, Rebuilding Futures. It looked like a school from the outside. Brick walls, trimmed grass, big windows. But when the doors closed behind me, it sounded like a lock clicking. A staff member with a plastic smile took my bag. "Welcome to Ridgeway," she said. Her name tag said Angela, but she said it like she was reading a line from a brochure. I had to empty my pockets, hand over my phone, belt, shoelaces, even my earbuds. They gave me a clear plastic bag with a toothbrush, 2 shirts with Ridgeway printed on the back, and plain gray sweats. Everything had a number tag. Mine was 47B. Then came the metal detector and a checklist about contraband. The staff acted polite, but had that fake tone people use when they already know you don't belong. Intake took about an hour. Forms, signatures, a bored nurse reading the script. They moved me through like a fast track they'd run 100 times. The hall smelled like bleach and cafeteria food. My room had 2 metal bunks, a small window too high to reach, and a cracked dresser. My bunkmates came in later. Marcus, 17, tall, sarcastic smile, and Luis, 15, quiet, small build, dark circles under his eyes. Marcus tossed his bag on the bed and said, "You the new kid? Welcome to Ridgeway High School for the morally confused." I asked how long he'd been here. He grinned. "Too long to still care." Luis barely looked up. He was writing something in a notebook. Every night, I'd later learn, he wrote letters to his little sister. He said she was the only one who still believed he'd come home soon. The first night was lights out at 9 o'clock. A guard did rounds every hour, flashlight beams sweeping the walls. You weren't allowed to close the door all the way. Morning started with a bell at 6 Honik. Breakfast was powdered eggs, toast, and milk that tasted like plastic. Then group therapy. Group therapy was in a circle of plastic chairs under a poster that said, "Own your harm, find your peace." The counselor, Miss Denning, talked like a podcast host. "Accountability is healing," she said. Each kid had to explain what they did wrong. When it was my turn, I said, "I didn't hurt anyone. My brother lied." She smiled too wide. "Denial is common at this stage. You'll get there." I said, "There's nothing to get to." She wrote something on her clipboard. "Resistance needs structured empathy." After that, I stopped sharing. Marcus warned me later. "If you don't say sorry, they keep you longer." He'd learned to fake it. "You just tell them you understand your triggers and cry a little," he said. "Then they call you cured." Luis whispered, "It doesn't matter. They already wrote our stories." Days blurred. Breakfast, chores, therapy, worksheets about anger cycles, lights out. Same thing every day. Talking got you nowhere. I started working out in the mornings. Push-ups, sit-ups, laps in the hallway. It helped me stay quiet. We weren't supposed to write anything that wasn't program approved, but I kept a small notebook under my mattress. I wrote short lines, not diary stuff, just facts. Day 9. Counselor says lying is a defense mechanism. I said silence is too. Day 14. Marcus laughed at breakfast for the first time. Day 20. Luis said he dreams of home every night. I don't. 2 months in, Mom visited. The staff arranged the room to look cozy. Plants, cookies, fake warmth. She hugged me like someone posing for a photo. "You look calmer," she said. I said, "I was calm before." She smiled tight. "See, that's the attitude we're fixing." She talked to the counselor afterward, praising Ridgeway for turning her daughter around. I heard her laugh down the hallway. I didn't feel angry, just empty. After that, I didn't see her again. Marcus kept things bearable. He'd joke about the group leaders, call them the emotion police. But at night, when lights went off, he talked quieter. "You know why you're here?" he said once. "Not because of what you did. Because they needed to believe they handled it. It's easier to say my daughter's getting help than we screwed her over." Luis nodded from the other bunk. Better a rehab kid than a broken family. I didn't answer. I just wrote it down later. After 6 months, they said I was ready for release. I hadn't admitted harm, but I'd been quiet, followed rules, and didn't fight. That was enough. They told me I'd made significant progress. At Ridgeway, check boxes beat confessions. Compliance looked like healing on paper. The night before I left, Marcus walked with me to the gate after lights out. The sky outside the barred window looked huge, empty. He said, "When you get out, don't expect a new family waiting. Expect the same one, just quieter." I said, "I know." And in the morning, they gave me my phone back. Dead battery, no messages. A staff member handed me a packet labeled Home Transition Plan. It said things like, "Be honest about your progress," and "Practice patience with family reintegration." Dad was waiting in the car outside. He didn't get out, just nodded when I opened the door. The drive home was silent, except for the GPS voice. Dad cleared his throat once, said, "Your mom's been worried sick." I looked out the window. I thought about what Marcus said, how people prefer a neat story to the messy truth. I wondered how you talk to people who've already decided who you are. When we pulled into the driveway, Mom's flowers were still lined up perfect, bright against the clean bricks. It looked like nothing had changed, and somehow that felt worse than if everything had. The first thing I noticed when I walked back into the house was the smell. Same candles, same floor polish, same fake sense of calm. Mom, Clara, was in the kitchen wearing her everything's fine smile. A tray of cookies sat on the counter, just like when guests come over. She said, "Welcome home," like she was greeting a neighbor. Ryan came down the stairs grinning wide. "Hey, big sis," he said. He looked older somehow, confident. His hair was styled, his clothes new. There was a new gaming setup in the living room, too. Big monitor, LED lights, brand new chair. Dad stood in the corner with his phone half in his hand. He gave me a quick pat on the shoulder. "We all make mistakes," he said like he was reading a quote from somewhere. My old room was gone. They'd turned it into a guest room. Fresh paint, decorative pillows, no trace of me. My stuff was packed into boxes in the garage labeled Virginia's Old Things. That night, we had dinner like it was a holiday. Mom asked surface questions. "Do they feed you well there? Did you learn anything helpful?" I said yes, just to keep it short. Ryan kept looking at me between bites like he was waiting for me to slip. The next morning, I found a note taped to the fridge. House Guidelines for Reintegration. It had bullet points like respect space, communicate calmly, demonstrate trustworthiness. It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was Mom's. School wasn't any better. The first day back, people stared like I was a new exhibit. Whispers followed me from the lockers to class. Someone said, "That's the girl who hit her brother." I heard it enough times that I stopped pretending I didn't. One teacher, Mr. Collins, pulled me aside after class. "I hope you're doing better now," he said, slow and careful, like talking to a recovering addict. I said, "Yeah." That was it. By the end of the week, I heard Ryan was telling people he'd forgiven me. A classmate said, "That's really mature of your brother." I laughed once, hard, then stopped. At home, Mom treated me like a guest on probation. She'd say things like, "It's nice to see you trying," or, "I hope this calm version of you lasts." If I forgot to close a cabinet or left a light on, she'd pause, breathe through her nose, and say, "Let's not slip back into old habits." Dad avoided any real talk. He'd just say, "We're proud of you," without looking up from his phone. Ryan liked to test me. He'd borrow my headphones and forget to return them. Once I caught him in the garage digging through my boxes. "Just looking for my old stuff," he said. He smirked and left a comic book half torn on the floor. I didn't react. I knew he wanted me to. After 2 weeks, I found a part-time job at a local auto shop. The owner, Rick, was in his 40s, bald, heavy hands, no small talk. He said, "You work, you get paid. Don't screw around." That was fine with me. The place smelled like oil and metal, and the noise of tools was constant but comforting. Machines didn't ask questions. Rick taught me how to change brakes, how to read engine sounds. He didn't care about my story. One day when I asked if he needed my ID for the paperwork, he said, "Just show up on time. That's ID enough." For the first time in months, I felt normal. I liked how Grease stayed honest. It didn't hide what it was. Back home, nothing had changed. Mom still avoided eye contact. Ryan kept finding new ways to poke. He'd step into my room, well, the guest room, and say, "You don't mind if I use your old charger, right?" I'd say, "Yeah, I mind," and he'd grin. Dinner conversations were short. Mom asked about work. Dad commented about the weather. Ryan bragged about grades, friends, everything. He was the perfect kid again. One night I got home late after a shift. They were in the living room watching TV. Ryan muted it and said, "Working hard? That place must be teaching you discipline." Mom smiled faintly. "See, positive structure works." I went upstairs without answering. The next day I came home early and heard Ryan talking on his phone in his room. His voice carried down the hall. "She's calm now because they fixed her," he said, laughing. "Yeah, it worked. She barely talks. She's like a robot now." I stood by the door until I heard him say, "Mom said she's proud of how I handled everything. Guess I'm the reason things are better." His friend laughed. Ryan said, "Yeah, I know. I'm basically the reason our family's okay." I walked out the front door before I could say anything. The air outside was cold enough to sting. I sat on the curb across the street. The neighborhood was quiet, sprinklers running, porch lights glowing, perfect little lives. I thought about how Mom said they'd fix me. What they really meant was I'd stopped fighting back. Silence was what they wanted, and I'd finally given it to them. A car passed, headlights sweeping across my face. I didn't move. I stayed until the street went dark again. The next morning, I opened a teen account at the credit union near the shop with my state ID. I deposited my first paycheck. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't know what I was saving for exactly. Maybe a car, maybe a room far away. But it felt good knowing I had something that was mine again, something nobody could take or twist into their story. I kept the receipts folded in my wallet. Each one felt like a small piece of freedom. Ryan had gotten cocky since I came back. At first it was small things. Taking my stuff, lying about it, laughing when I caught him. Then it turned into something else. I started noticing money missing from Mom's purse. Small things disappearing from drawers. When Mom noticed, she didn't even ask him. She asked me. "I know you've been trying," she said one night, voice calm but sharp around the edges. "But old habits don't vanish overnight." I said, "You think I stole $20?" She sighed. "I didn't say that." Ryan walked by, eating chips, pretending not to listen. I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. The next morning, she found her watch gone. She accused me again. That evening, Ryan posted a story online saying, "When toxic people play the victim, it's just sad." He tagged a quote about recovery not being real for everyone. A few kids from school reshared it. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. People believe what they want. He liked that silence. He'd hover by me at breakfast and say, "You going to yell this time, or are you going to do that quiet, angry thing?" I didn't answer. I just grabbed my bag and left for the shop. At work, Rick kept me busy. Grease, tools, customers who complained about noises their cars didn't make. It was simple and honest. Rick didn't talk much, but when he did, it stuck. "Family can make you crazy," he said one afternoon while tightening a bolt. "They build a picture in their heads, and then they get mad when you don't fit in it." I said, "They think they fixed me." Rick snorted. "People like control. You stopped giving them the reaction they wanted. That's what's really driving them nuts." At home, things were unraveling. Ryan's lies were catching up. One of his teachers called Mom because he was caught plagiarizing an essay. She told them he was under stress from family issues. When I walked in that night, she was crying in the kitchen. Ryan had disappeared with her debit card for a few hours. When he came back, he said he needed space and slammed his door. She turned to me, like it was my fault. "Can't you try to be supportive? He's still healing from what happened with you." I said, "He's not healing. He's manipulating you." Her eyes went cold. "Don't project your issues onto him." I stopped trying to explain. Silence was easier. It bothered her more anyway. 2 days later, everything blew up. I was under a car at the shop when I heard shouting out front. Rick called my name. "You better come out here." Mom was standing by the counter, red-faced, gripping her purse like she might swing it. You need to stop enabling my daughter, she said to Rick. She's supposed to be in recovery, not hiding in garages. Rick wiped his hands, calm as ever. She's working, ma'am. Harder than most adults I know. She pointed at me. You don't understand. She has violent tendencies. She needs supervision. She's manipulating you. Rick stepped closer, voice low but solid. Lady, the only one yelling here is you. My shop's for work, not whatever this is. She glared, shaking. You'll regret protecting her. Rick nodded toward the door. Then you can take that energy somewhere else. Out. She froze for a second, like she couldn't believe someone talked back to her, then turned and stormed off. I didn't say a word. That night, she was waiting when I got home. The lights were off, except for the one over the dining table. She stood there with her arms crossed. How dare you humiliate me like that, she said. Marching in there yelling at my boss was your idea. I didn't do anything, I said. You made me look insane in front of a stranger. I said, you didn't need my help for that. Her voice broke into a shout. You think you're better than this family now? You think you can just walk around pretending you're fixed while the rest of us suffer? Ryan came downstairs pretending to mediate. Mom, calm down. She's doing that thing again. You're scaring her, Virginia. I turned to him. You started this. Mom stepped between us. Don't you raise your voice. I didn't. See, Ryan said. She's doing it again. Something in her snapped. She slapped me. The sound hit harder than the sting. She froze, hand trembling. Ryan smirked behind her. I straightened up. My voice was flat. You need help more than I ever did. Dad appeared from the hallway, half awake, half useless. He looked between us, said nothing, and walked into the kitchen. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. I went upstairs and packed my bag. Just clothes, my wallet, a few tools from the shop. I wrote a note on the back of an envelope. I'm not angry, just done. When I came back down, she was sitting at the table crying without sound. Ryan leaned on the wall, arms crossed, still playing the innocent. I didn't say anything. I walked out the door. Outside, the night was cool and quiet. The streetlights buzzed. As I passed the next house, Mrs. Heller was on her porch, watering her plants, even though it was dark. She saw me with the bag and said, "Good riddance." I stopped for a second, looked at her. "Yeah," I said, half smiling. "You'll see." Then I kept walking. The room above Rick's garage wasn't much, but it was mine. It smelled like oil and metal, and the floor creaked when the wind shifted. I finished my GED through night classes at the community center. Nobody at home asked about school anyway. Rick cleared it with the landlord as long as the rent showed up and the fire extinguisher tags were current. Nobody asked my age. I worked long hours at the shop. Rick paid me cash at first, then started putting me on the books. He gave me a key to the garage and said, "Lock up when you're done. Don't burn the place down." That was his version of trust. Nights were quiet. I'd sit by the window with my laptop typing. At first it was just notes, memories from Ridgeway, the fake smiles, the scripted therapy lines. Then I started posting them online under an anonymous account called The Ones They Fixed. The first post read, "I was sent away for something I didn't do. They said it was recovery. It was punishment." People started commenting. Some said they'd been there too. One person mentioned the same counselor. Another shared photos of the dorms. Within a week, I got dozens of messages. Kids, parents, even a journalist asking for details. I didn't give my name or location. I just kept posting. Someone eventually dropped a link to an article from 2 years back. Ridgeway Youth Recovery, under investigation for unethical practices. It mentioned the same counselors, the same methods. It said the place was run by a company that rebranded every few years under new names. Rick found me one evening still typing when he came up to check the heater. "You doing homework or starting a war?" he asked. "Just writing." He nodded, looked around. "Good. Just make sure you build something out of it. Don't let it eat you." A few weeks later, one of my posts got reposted on a big forum. The comments exploded. Other families started recognizing the name Ridgeway. The local news picked it up. Small story, but enough to stir things up. They called it Rehab or Rebrand, the hidden industry of behavioral programs. I didn't say a word publicly. I didn't have to. The story spoke for itself. Then my phone rang one afternoon. "Mom." The moment I answered, her voice was shaking. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're ruining this family." I said, "You mean telling the truth? You're making us look insane. Your brother is suffering because of this. You're dragging his name through the mud." I said, "He dragged mine first." She started to cry, then switched to anger. "You've always wanted attention. Now you've got it." I hung up. Time passed faster after that. I turned 18, got my license, and Rick handed me the keys to an old pickup. "It's yours if you can fix it," he said. Took me 2 weeks to get it running. It wasn't pretty, but it started every time. That was more than I could say for most things in my life. Work stayed steady. The account kept growing. I never posted names, but people connected dots on their own. Some nights I'd check the comments and see strangers defending kids like me. That felt new. Then the phone call started. First from Mom again, this time shorter. "Your brother's been suspended," she said like it was my fault. "He was caught stealing money from classmates. He says it's because you filled his head with resentment." I said, "He's just getting caught for what he's always done." She said, "Don't you dare talk about him that way. He's still your brother." "I know," I said. "That's the problem." A week later, Dad called. His voice was quiet, tired. "We need to talk," he said. I met him halfway outside a diner parking lot. He didn't get out of the car, just rolled the window down halfway. "I saw Ryan break that monitor," he said. "The night everything went down. He was scared, and I didn't say anything. I thought it'd keep the peace." I leaned on the window frame. "You let them send me away to keep the peace." He looked down at the steering wheel. "I'm sorry." I pulled out my phone, started recording. "Say it again." He hesitated. "Virginia, say it." "I'm sorry." I stopped recording. "I don't need your guilt," I said, and walked away. I never posted it. The next month, Ryan got caught shoplifting from a convenience store. Security footage, police, everything. Mom showed up at the station screaming that he was a good boy and it was all a misunderstanding. It made the local paper. Small piece, back section. Rick handed it to me at work, smirking. "Guess karma's got better timing than most people." I didn't smile, but I felt something close. Later that night, I sat on the truck bed outside the garage. The air smelled like oil and rain. I opened my phone, scrolled through the news comments, and saw people talking about Ridgway again, this time linking it to families like mine. Somewhere between the noise and the silence, I realized I didn't feel angry anymore. Just done. The truth was finally louder than their version. For the first time, that felt like enough. It had been months since I'd heard from any of them. The last thing Mom said was that I destroyed the family. After that, silence. I kept working, fixing cars, saving money, and not thinking about them. Then one night, near closing time, I heard knocking on the garage door. I opened it and saw Ryan. He looked wrecked. Same hoodie he used to brag about, now torn and dirty. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept in days. "Mom kicked me out," he said, voice flat. I leaned against the counter. "Why?" "She lost it. Said I embarrassed her. Said I turned out just like you." He gave a dry laugh that turned into a cough. "Guess she finally ran out of people to blame." I handed him a bottle of water and a towel. He sat on a stool shaking. After a minute, he said, "I lied, Virginia. That night, I made it all up. I didn't say anything. I wanted her to look at me, that's all. The bruise wasn't even from you. I fell off my bike earlier that week. I knew she'd believe it." He rubbed his hands over his face. "I didn't think they'd actually send you away." "You did," I said quietly. He started crying, full breakdown. I didn't know how to stop it. "Every time she talked about you, she looked at me like I saved her. I liked it. I just kept going." I didn't feel anger, just distance. I handed him another bottle of water. "Tell her, not me." He looked up confused. "She won't listen." "That's your problem now." He left a few minutes later, wiping his face. I watched him walk down the street, shoulders hunched like the air itself was too heavy. I went back inside, locked the door, and kept working. The wrench in my hand felt solid, familiar, real. A few weeks passed. Then a letter came in the mail, addressed in Dad's handwriting. I opened it halfway, then stopped. I skimmed the first paragraph and didn't bother finishing. It said, "Claire's having a breakdown. Ryan's in therapy. I'm leaving town. I'm sorry for what we did to you." I folded it once, dropped it in a drawer, and never opened it again. 2 years later, I was 20 and running my own corner of the shop. Rick had semi-retired and let me handle most of the day-to-day work. He put me on the books and let me invoice my bays under my own DBA, Virginia Reed Auto Repair. Business was steady. I had a small apartment over a bakery across town, plain but quiet. I worked 6 days a week, fixed what was broken, and didn't look back. Rick stopped by sometimes. He'd drop a coffee on the counter and say, "You're doing fine, kid." That was his version of proud. I'd hear about my family in pieces. A customer mentioned a woman named Clara who'd started showing up at church, ranting about betrayal. Another said Ryan was living with relatives upstate, in and out of therapy, trying to find himself. Apparently, Mom had tried to sue the school district for ruining Ryan's reputation after his shoplifting arrest. It went nowhere. She'd burned too many bridges. Mrs. Heller brings her Corolla in sometimes. She told Rick once, "That poor woman finally lost her mind." I didn't laugh. It just felt like the story closing itself without me in it. One morning, I walked into the shop early. Sunlight hit the metal racks, making the wrenches gleam. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. The message read, "I told her everything. I'm sorry." I didn't need to ask who it was. Ryan. I stared at the screen for a while. I typed a few words, deleted them, then set the phone down. I didn't feel angry or satisfied, just quiet. Outside, the morning was cool. The street was empty, except for the sound of a delivery truck down the block. I stepped out to the parking lot, leaned on the hood of an old pickup I'd been working on. I pulled the wrench from my back pocket, the same one Rick gave me years ago when I first started. The metal was worn smooth from use. It caught the sunlight and threw a sharp line across the ground. For a second, I thought about how everything I'd fixed over the years had one thing in common. Nothing ever went back exactly the way it was before. You could repair it, make it work again, but the break was still there, even if no one could see it. I looked back at the shop, the open bay door, the noise of a new day starting. Some things don't get fixed. You just learn to live without their noise.